Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 3 of Farm Fact Friday. Of course, you have Derrick LeClaire and myself here this week. And this week, Derrick is going to be our expert on IP soybeans. So, Derrick, go ahead.
All right, thanks a lot, Tanya. Yeah, this week I want to touch briefly on IP soybeans, how they differ from your conventional soybeans, and what IP means and what they're designed to do. But first, I want to talk about what we do in the data part of Devron there, because a lot of you might work with some of the variable rate and the prescription stuff that Devron, the data team, does, or even maybe you've never seen it before. And it's what myself being a data technician, what I get to touch and work with every day. So I'll just share my screen here. Where do I do that? Oh, there we go. Quick brain fart there. So let me know when you can see that, Tanya.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so this here, what I have a picture of on the screen is a yield map. So this is produced by the combine monitor. So this is this farmer here. This is when he harvested the field. The green shows the higher producing area, so higher yielding, and the red shows the lower producing areas or lower yielding. And this crop, I believe, is corn. So I don't have the scale up here beside me, but this would be more bushels of corn per acre, and this would be less. So this is a pretty valuable a tool, not only so you know, hey, this part of the field yielded higher than this part back here, but you can also use it for future planning. So what we do a lot of in the data side of Devron is variable rate prescriptions, meaning this area produced higher than that area, so you're obviously going to treat this area different than that area. So what we end up doing with this is drawing zones and then using those zones to treat those areas different. So this example here I'm going to show you is for planting. So as I mentioned, this was corn in 2020, and then this spring the farmer wanted to plant it into soybeans. So they asked the data department to or the dig team, data insights group is I guess what I should call it. They asked us to make management zones for them to do variable rate soybean planting. So here, like I mentioned, this is the yield map. And then if I go over one here, I think it's, oh, no, I went over too far. This one here, this is what we call, or I think those are that's the script. I think I have another one here. Just give me a second, Tanya. Got too many folders here. I think it's
No worries.
over here. Oh, for some reason it's not showing it, but it's hard to see in the video. But if I were to put this up to the yield map, the other map will probably show it better. But if you remember, this area here was where it was pretty high yielding for the corn, and then this area back here was where it was low yielding. So we deem this area based on the corn last year. We deem this as a high producing zone, and then back here a low producing zone, and then the yellow and the orange is kind of in the middle there, medium high to medium low. So if I go back to that other folder, so that back there was the management zones that we draw, and then based on those management zones, we make what we call a planting draft. So you're probably wondering to yourself, well, I thought in this other picture this was the high producing zone here, which is now red, and then back here the low producing zone, which is green. And if you notice that, you are correct. The tricky thing with soybeans, which is the crop this farmer wants to plant, is the populations are kind of are the opposite of the management zones. So with corn, if I go back to corn, for example, the population zones line up with the management zones because with corn, the low producing zones, you're not going to get as many emerge or supposedly or not get as good of a crop. So you want to increase that population so you can maximize the corn that emerges. And in the high producing areas, you're assuming that you're going to have a better crop or more seed is going to emerge from the ground. So you can cut back your population a little bit to compensate to because you're going to get more emerge. Whereas with soybeans, the way soybeans emerge, they really like to branch out. So So in areas where there's not as much population, they spread out. Like think of it as spreading your arms there. Their branches spread out to fill in that gap. So in the low producing area, you want to increase your population to increase because you figure some are gonna not emerge. So you want to increase your population, and then whatever doesn't emerge will branch out. Whereas in the high producing area, you want to decrease your population because if you put too much population, then there won't be enough for the soybeans to branch out, and then they kind of get crowded and don't yield or produce as high. So it's kind of
Derek, when you're saying emerge, you're talking about germination, right? Just for
yep.
those people that are watching that don't know farm lingo, can you just talk us through what you mean when you say emerge?
So I guess in terms of emergence there, I guess emergence and germination are two different things because like so emergence there is if you plant a seed in the ground and then you see it physically pop out of the ground, where germination, that's kind of the first step of the growing process. So that's when the seed takes up water and then the first emerging root comes out of the seed and then uh, basically anchors itself in the soil to extract water and nutrients, and then from there it grows up and pokes through the ground, which is emergence there. So uh, in the lower producing areas, for depend it could be a wet spot of the field or lower nutrients or there could be multiple factors why it's lower producing than the higher producing area, but you figure that what you plant there it might not emerge out of the ground, right? So you have to compensate for that by planting more. So that's what I mean by emerger. Did that explain that, Tanya, or do you want me to explain a little different?
Yep, no, I think that explained it really well. And, a lot of the time emergence is related to weather events that are taking
Hmm.
place that maybe are outside of a farmer's control. So we don't really know what that's going to look like every year, which is why a variable rate script, is very handy for the grower to try and offset some of the weather conditions by changing their planting rates to compensate for things that they don't know are coming yet.
Hmm. Because it's as much as we wish it would happen, it's pretty silly to think that if you plant, for example, beans, say for example you plant 180,000 seeds, it's silly to think that every 180,000 would come up. You'd love for that to happen, but you always have some that if you have bad seed or you have some that for whatever reason don't make it, right? So and they have thresholds for that too, right? Because I'm sure Tanya, being an agronomist, you've walked some fields in the spring after a big rain or a big drought or some other reason, and you kind of determine, oh shoot, should we replant this field or because you've only emerged 60% or something of what you planted, right? So that comes into decision for the farmer as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so but so then this here, what I'm showing is a prescription. So I like to think of it when we're working with prescriptions, I like to think of myself kind of like a doctor, right? Like you're writing a prescription for the patient to take to the pharmacy, right? Where in this scenario, what we're doing is writing a prescription for the farmer to input into their monitor, and then when they go and plant, the monitor follows this blueprint and prints accordingly or plants accordingly. So like I said, that's the prescription there. So if I go to the next one, this is what we call actually, sorry, my fault. This here that's still the draft 2 there because it doesn't have the checkbox in it. So this is just a draft 2. This here is the prescription. So this is the final draft on what is sent to the monitor and the tractor there. You'll notice some weird blocks in here as well. And what we do at Devron there, we call these Vera blocks. So I think I measured this before I took this picture. These are 80 feet by 80-foot squares. So in this example here, so the orange is 155,000 kiloseeds, means thousands of seeds. So 155,000 seeds in this big orange area here. And since we're doing the variable rate, we like to kind of test and say, well, did we make the right decision here? Should we have went higher or should we have went lower? So in this scenario, so like I mentioned, 155,000 is this big block here. This dark red is 145,000, so 80 feet by 80 feet. And I'm not sure exactly what size of planter this farmer has. Let's say he has a 40-foot planter. So this would be 2 passes back and forth of width there. And then they take that to yield when they go to harvest it. They can analyze these little spots. So yeah, so this is 10,000 seeds less these red spots here, and then this yellow spot here, that's another 15,000 higher. So if we would have planted 170,000 in this area, how does it yield? Did we, by spending the extra money on the 15,000 an acre, were we farther ahead, or do we gain about the same and we spent more on seed than we wanted to? And that's goes for all the zones here. We always go one zone lower and one zone higher. So this here is the 215,000 seeds per acre right here. And so the yellow there, the kind of the lighter yellow, that's the 190,000. So that's this yellow square here. And then the darker green is the 225,000. So again, analyzing if we would have went one zone higher or one zone lower, how would that show up? How does that affect our profitability at the end of the year or yield result?
And
So
this is very this is what Devron does that's different than everybody else in the market. So that other picture Derrick showed, the draft, that is what you might see coming from somebody that's creating their own zones or from the competition. It's a great way to utilize some of the data you have from harvest, but essentially you don't know if it's working or not. Whereas with the Vera blocks in it, that's very unique to Devron. At the end of the year, we'll get that harvest layer back from the combine, and you should be able to see exactly where those check blocks show up. And the farmer then can, instead of just having a variable rate script and thinking they're doing something great for their operation, with the check blocks added and the Vera blocks added, they can actually analyze it. And that's what our data team is so great at doing at the end of the year, analyzing, did this work? Did this pay? Does it make sense for this farmer to use this type of script on this field? And then they can start making better decisions that are going to start paying off in their operation and making sure that they're making the right decisions for their field because they can actually check it again. It's not just a guess at the end of the year.
yeah, we like to, I think the term we use a lot is validate. We like to validate that the decision we made by putting that population in that area was the best decision for the farmer there. And then the farmer might put that into consideration next year. Like say, for example, in this orange area, the 145,000 was a bigger bang for their buck. So then next year, assuming they use the same zones, they would use the lower rate in that area. Because I know most of the fields we do this Veriblock validation just to make sure, basically just to check our work. But I know I've seen some fields where the farmer's been doing this for a few years and they have an idea, pretty good idea of what rate works best in that part of the field, so they don't need to use the check blocks or Veriblocks. So that's the ultimate goal you'd like to get to, but also there's always yield maps change all the time, right? Depending on what the weather was like or certain scenarios, that a certain pest in a certain area of the field. So using multiple years of data is very highly recommended because every year is different, right? So
yeah.
And
cool.
And I showed the yield map there. This is just one way of many to make management zone. That's actually quite a big process there. You can use bare soil imagery, so that's you can kind of see that on top of this map here, just to the north of it. You just kind of look for different shades and throughout the field, and then you can draw zones based on that. Or there's NDVI. There's many different ways, and actually. Since there's so many different methods for drawing zones, we're actually going to have Erin Egan as a guest on here in the near future because she's she's very experienced and has a lot of knowledge in the zone making and zone drawing area of the company. So we talked to her already, and she said she'd love to come on. So we'll get her on here in the next couple weeks to kind of give us a better idea on how to draw proper zones and zones that you can, because you can draw zones of anything, right? But you want them to be meaningful and accurate. So she'll give us a better idea on that. And just to confirm there, because I screwed it up at the start there. So this is the draft here. So this is what you make from the management zones, which I think is on the other page, but this is the draft 2 here, and then this is the script. So basically, it's the script when you see the variable blocks in the map. So the script is basically, okay, that's our final draft of zones with the validation blocks in it. So our script, that's our final step, and then we send that to the monitor to be planted there. And I think I have, it might be in that other folder that's not showing up well, but I did also add a picture of an as applied. See, it doesn't want to pull it up for some reason, but you can see it there. You can, again, this is the just the management zone. So because it's soybeans, the population is opposite of the management zone. So you can see in this as applied there, this is basically a record of what the monitor recorded that they planted. So as the farmer grows across the field, in this high producing area, we want low population of soybeans because they bush out. So it kind of it follows the similar shape and also has the variable blocks in there as well. And then back here with the low producing zones, you see the high population of soybeans. So this here is what we call an as applied, and it's basically a map of the monitor showing us what they applied in each area. And you can also look as well, if I could open the picture, you could see on the side there the legend on, they put this many seeds per acre in each zone there. So you can follow it along, and when we go to analyze that at the end of the year, that's what we use, is the actual as applied, because the prescription is telling it what to put down, and the as applied is what it actually put down. So as you can see, it's fairly accurate, but there's probably some areas where they're not putting, when you're talking thousands of seeds, right? It might be off a few seeds here and there, but you get the general picture there. The zones are the same based on the as applied. So.
So if you go back to the script you created for the soybeans, you're following IP beans this year. Is there a difference in planting population rates between traditional or conventional soybeans and IP soybeans?
That, to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure, because this is our first time growing IPs. I know edible beans, which are a totally different crop, like they're still beans, but a different type of bean. I know their population, I believe, is lower than soybeans, but IP soybeans are still soybeans. They've got their different traits, which I'll explain a little bit later. They're unique by IP, but I'm not exactly sure if the rates are the same or not. That's actually a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that, Tanya. So I'm thinking that they're, depending on the individual IP variety, I'm thinking they're similar to soybeans, or similar to conventional soybeans, but I could be wrong. So I'll have to look into that. I'll obviously need that info when I go to plant this spring. So I'll have to find it eventually. So was there any other questions you think, Tanya, related to VR and kind of what the data team works on? Like, we're actually starting to get some requests in for planting and seeding scripts here already, and we'll really get ramped up here probably the middle of March to the end of March, early April. And then when we start getting the yield maps back there in September, October, November, that's when we can collect all the data and all the prices and all that, and start analyzing to see how we did. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think I had any other questions. I think it'll be cool when we can pull Aaron in to show everybody how to create zones. And once planters start rolling in the next month and a bit here, it'll be interesting to get in see if we can get in the cab of a tractor that's running a variable rate script and see what that looks like from in the cab of the tractor.
Yeah, for sure, because you can watch what the monitor's doing and see what rate it's putting on, so you can kind of follow it along and watch it. So no, that's a good idea. I'll definitely have to do that. And speaking of planters rolling, one of my colleagues there said he's seen on Twitter that they're already running corn planters in Texas right now, so down in southern Texas. So it's coming, so working its way north.
I believe it. We're not ready here yet, that's for
Nope,
sure.
nope, for sure. But at least we're getting rain today. At least where we are in Chatham, we're getting rain. So, uh, so it's not snow. So it's a sign spring's getting closer anyway.
Yeah, we have
So,
rain here too, but I've been hearing it's gonna flash freeze. Hopefully
oh,
not.
no, I hope not. That's never fun.
Mm-mm.
So is so so that's VR the kind of the VR process there. VR, I mean variable rate. So that's kind of the process uh mainly myself and Laura Vernarco there as the data technicians, what we get to play with a lot in the springtime and this time of year, gathering all the data and organizing it for our data scientists to analyze. But so yeah, so that's variable rate analysis. So then I'll move on to, hopefully these work. Yep. Then I'll move on to talking a little bit about IP soybeans there. So as I mentioned earlier, IP soybeans, just like what I was showing you here, are soybeans. They're the same species, but IP, it stands for identity preserved. So basically, the point of IPs are they have unique characteristics that certain end users or markets want. So the big thing with IP is you can't use Roundup there, which is a common chemical that conventional soybean growers use because it mostly kills everything. There's more and more every year getting resistant to it, but it's kind of something you spray. You spray once the beans are a certain height, like kind of probably about well, not quite waist high there, but probably about knee high or whatnot, or even probably between ankle and knee high there, depending on the time of year. We normally in Canada here, we normally spray our Roundup there about probably the middle of June, somewhere in there. But it's a quick and easy herbicide there. It's easy to apply and it kills uh, anything that's not resistant to it. So you can just spray it and you have to keep an eye on it, but you can, for the most part, walk away and then you're done spraying for the year. But identity preserved, the end markets, the end users that are eventually going to use this type of bean, they don't want to have any of the chemical, which is glyphosate and Roundup. They don't want that. They don't want traces of that in their on their soybeans. And they also have other unique characteristics as well. So every every IP variety has different unique characteristics. So, and because you can't use Roundup and there's different management practices that are kind of that aren't as convenient as conventional, you get paid a premium on them. So my IP beans that this first time growing them, myself or dad or anyone there, it's their first time growing them. I'm kind of being the guinea pig in the family. Uh, it comes with a $3.50 premium. So if you go on any of the grain websites there, and whatever price they're offering to pay the farmer for delivering their soybeans, you get $3.50 added on top of that. So that's the incentive there to put up with more of the headache and whatnot. So so kind of the big thing I wanted to discuss today with IPs is the different in helium color. And you're probably wondering what helium is. And this kind of a cool chart that shows the ranges of colors and kind of shows where it is on the grain. So helium, that's kind of the, I don't know if you want to call it a little eye type thing, but most conventional soybeans, they're either D or E for the most part. Black or in perfect black. So they have the black helium there. But then once you get into IP soybeans, you can get brown, buff, which is kind of looks like a tan a little bit, and then white, yellow, or clear. And I believe the variety I'm growing this year, I think it's called imperfect yellow. So it'd be similar to this here. So it kind of blends in right with the grain because the grain is kind of like a real dark orange, yellow brown. So it kind of blends in pretty well there. So so like I mentioned, soybeans are most conventional soybeans are the black to light, imperfect black, and then once you get into more of the IP or identity preserved soybeans, you get the different helium colors. And I think if I had another picture here, what is the function of the helium and what part of the plant is it? So it says here it's the eye, it's also called the eye, and it's the point of attachment of the seed on the pod. So I wish I should have got a picture of this here. I guess we can show this throughout the year, but uh, beans grow on the soybean plant and are kind of stored in a pod, and it's kind of like I kind of like to picture it as a cocoon type thing. It's kind of like a caterpillar when they're in their cocoon and ready to hatch as a butterfly. It's like a little it's basically like a cocoon, and the more beans you have in this pod or cocoon like thing, the better, because that means you have more grain per plant. So uh so the actual seed of the bean is attached in the pod, and the helium there that I showed in the previous picture, that's the attachment point. So that's where the stem attaches the the bean to the pod there. And then this here,
So if
this
anybody that goes grocery shopping buys green beans or even snap peas or snow
yep.
peas fresh from the grocery store, it just picture that. It looks a little bit different, and I'm sure in season Derek will show you some pictures and videos of what it looks like on a soybean and an IP soybean plant. But if you think of the same thing, it's just like a pod, just like a green bean from the grocery store. And what he's talking about is right where that bean attaches to the pod. Basically the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point there, Tanya. Because yeah, like you mentioned, what you get in the grocery store, that's the whole pod there, and then in that pod might be, uh, well, if it's peas, peas. I think I believe have more peas in a pod than beans, because peas are smaller, I believe. But but there could be any range of number of beans or peas in that pod. So yeah, when you go to the grocery store, you see these long green things. That's a pod, and then you crack them open to get to the peas of the beans. So it's the same thing in soybeans there. But when we harvest them there, they've dried down, so they kind of turn brown. So they're brown and really like I don't know if crunchy is the right term because you don't eat them, but they're a lot more, they're dry, and they're a lot more, they're not, they just don't have that green smooth feel as they do in the grocery store there. They're just dry, and they're just dry and look dead there, but that's just the plant kind of dying off and drying down for harvest there. Because another thing because the thing with IPs as well is you have, well, I guess with soybeans and corn and everything too, you have a contract to deliver so many bushels of grain to the elevator. So same thing, I have a IP soybean contract, but since its IPs are unique, are more unique and more kind of management sensitive than conventional soybeans, they have some things you have to follow. So because their identity preserved and it's specific to what the end user wants, you have to be really careful with contamination there. So like on our farm there, I'm the first one, I'm going to be the first one to try IP beans on our farm. I guess I could take my screen share off there. Stop sharing. I'll be the first one on my farm to try these IP beans. So when we go to harvest it, we're going to have to make sure that the combine is free from uh, any of the other soybeans that we've harvested, because all the other soybeans that we grow are the conventional. So that's the one where you can use Roundup, and it has the black helium color there. But and conventional soybeans, no matter what variety they are, they're conventional, so they're being used for the same purpose. So once you go from one field to the next, you don't have to worry. Even if it's a different variety, you don't have to worry about cleaning it out because the soybean's a soybean, and that at that point. But with IP beans, because it's very strict and unique on what the buyer wants, you have to make sure that you don't have any conventional soybeans in there. So you have to clean, like when you go to plant, you have to make sure your cleaners or your planters cleaned from any of the conventional soybean seed, your combine's clean, your wagons are clean. So it's a lot of kind of sanitation, if you want to call it that, but a lot of cleanliness and making sure there's no contamination, because when you go to deliver these IP beans, they take a sample from your wagon and then they analyze them there. If they see, if for example, in my case, if the beans I'm growing have a yellow helium and they look through and see a handful of black helium beans, well then that's a big red flag to them, and they might even reject the whole load if they see that, because it's very specific on the traits and the qualities of the bean that the end user wants. So that's the kicker there. Why you get paid the extra $3.50, because of the contamination risk, and also because of the tougher weed control, because you can't just go in with Roundup and spray your typical easy to kill weeds. You have to use other herbicides that might not be as effective.
Mhm.
So so and the plan for me, what to do is hopefully they're the first ones we plant and the first ones we harvest. That way we haven't done any of the other soybeans, and then we don't have to be as picky cleaning there. Make sure there's just no corn or wheat or anything in the combine from last year. So
Good call.
yeah.
Now, do you have, when it comes to conventional soybeans, for example, the list of different varieties that you can plant is essentially endless.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have access to the same big list of varieties for IPs, or is it a lot more limited?
Since I'm new to it there, I say it's a lot more limited because, well, I was gonna say not as many companies have IPs, but I think most of them that have the conventional beans probably have IPs as well. But I'm thinking that because they're so unique they're so unique and so tailored to what the buyer specifically wants. I would say that there's probably less to choose from, and you kind of have to be I you kind of have to choose wisely on what bean variety you want to grow, because I know, like when I went and seen my dealer there, I said I want to grow the same kind that my neighbors are growing, because there's a particular variety that a lot of guys in my area are growing and that work well for them. So that's kind of the main variety for that area. Whereas for conventional soybeans, you probably know as well, Tanya, you could probably make a list of 20 or 25 different varieties within a county that are being planted, right? So yeah, I think the options are a lot more limited for IP, and also because of the extra hassle and the extra fine print, there's a lot less people that grow them as well, right? So it'll because of
Mhm.
more management and all the other stuff too, right? And we'll see that. Like I said, this is my first year growing them, but I've heard from other people that they don't yield as well as conventional either. So, but you think for $3.50, well, that's, I think, well, I guess with bean prices being about $17, $18, $3.50 a bushel is nil, but still, with that, if you're down a couple bushels or whatnot, or down a little bit, you're not going to be with the $3.50 premium. It's not like you're going to be losing your shirt or anything, right? So that's kind of the compensation and kind of the incentive to grow it, is the kind of the bonus that comes with it, like the not the bonus for the convenience of it, the bonus for what you get paid for, right? So hopefully it pays out. It'll be interesting to watch it grow and keep an eye on it and see what it's like there. Maybe I'll hate it and I won't want to do it again, but maybe it'll be good and we'll keep doing it. So that's why I'm kind of it's kind of in a trial stage on our farm at this point.
Mhm.
And I guess
Yeah, I was just
Another,
trying to see, did you contract at a specific price ahead of time, or can you put them in the ground and contract them later? How does that work?
it's similar to conventional soybeans. So you can, like, I haven't contracted any yet, but similar to soybeans, like conventional soybeans, you can market them whenever you'd like. So I could not even have them contracted when I deliver them to the elevator, but I think it is a wise decision to forward contract if you have that ability to. So, well, I guess everyone has the ability to, but I know with corn, for example, switching crops here all of a sudden, but we have a storage at our home farm, so we can contract our crop to be sold in a month, say for example February, March, when you're not harvesting the crop, but you have it stored on your farm, so you have access to it at any time. So, but
Mhm.
IPs, I'm
I
gonna
think
take
what
them.
something people don't realize is all of these commodities, soybeans and corn and wheat and cotton and oats, they're actually all traded on the stock exchange.
Hmm.
Typically Chicago is where commodities are traded, and that's where the pricing comes from. So we were talking in the vegetable world, the grocery stores or the processors set the price, whereas your traditional row crops like soybeans and corn, the price for them is actually set on the stock exchange. So farmers aren't just, farmers, and everybody forgets that sometimes. They're also stock traders, really. They're looking at forward pricing, they're looking at future contracts, they're doing spot pricing, they're constantly watching whether the Chicago exchange, whether that's through their local elevator or through the Chicago website or apps on their phone, and that's how they try and figure out what kind of money they're going to make in a year. So looking at the price right now, they can say, okay, I can make money at this price. I think my yield is going to be 40 bushel an acre for IP beans, for example. So I'm planting 100 acres. So I'm going to contract out 50% of that or 75% of that. That way I'm guaranteed to recover that amount of cost when I ship versus an unknown amount of money coming in later on in the season.
Hmm. And that's a good point, Tanya. Is a rule of thumb or an important rule to follow as a farmer is, say for example, if you think your yield is going to be 40 bushel, well, don't contract for 40 bushel, because if something happens and you only get 35 bushel, well then you have that extra 5 bushel that you can't fill your contract. So what you end up having to do is buy from another farmer, and then that way you can fill your contract. And and with the price changing there, it might work out that you you buy grain cheaper than and the price goes down, but the price could also go up too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so I'm lucky there that my dad and my cousin grow the same crops as I do, other than IP soybeans. So if I overestimate, then I can just buy from them there. But yeah, there's some people that they don't necessarily know of another farmer that well, or I guess they probably know a farmer well, but they don't have a family member that also farms. So it's not a matter of going to dad or your uncle and saying, hey, can I buy 500 bushel off of you if I over contracted? You have to go around and call farmers and see if you can buy their grains. So to save the hassle and the money loss there, it's it, it's wise to under contract, because what you'd say, for example, you contract for 35 bushel, but you actually produce 40 and deliver that. They keep track of that at the elevator, because they always weigh you in and weigh you out. So that extra 5 bushels an acre there, if it's if they actually have it at the elevator, then you can sell it right there and then. So that's a really good point, Tanya, is to don't over contract, because it's a pain in the butt to try to buy someone else's grain to fill your contract. So
Mm-hmm. We never know what Mother Nature's gonna do.
no, no, that's what makes it exciting there. Every year is different. And you could probably agree as well, Tanya, that playing basically the stock exchange, what farmers do, it's like it's like gambling, right? You're like, well, the price is at right here at this time. Do I think it's going to go up or do I think it's going to go down? So that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not like it's not like your paycheck here at Devron where you have a set amount that you get paid every 2 weeks. It's, uh, you basically, you're your own HR person in a way, right? You basically determine how much you get paid. So, and it's all on your
Mm-hmm.
shoulders. So,
Mm-hmm. And there's
so,
not a lot of wiggle room, especially in row crops like beans and corn. You're not profiting $1,000 an acre, right? A good year on IPs or conventional corn and beans is like $300 an acre
mm-hmm,
profit. So there's not a lot of wiggle room in those decisions.
mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have a whole lot of room for error there.
Mm-hmm. But we can get into that more later on in the season, as
Yep.
well as we get into contracts and what that looks like. And I'm sure we will visit an elevator or two to show
Mm-hmm.
you what those guys are up to as well.
Yep. No, for sure. Because yeah, it's a pretty cool thing to see. All not the amount of grain that goes through that and the process that they do it. So
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so that's a quick overview of the variable rate stages and the process we use here at Devron, and also differentiating IP beans from conventional beans and some of their, and basically what IP beans are and why they're unique and identity preserved is why they're called that.
Cool. No,
So
that was great, Derrick. I learned a lot.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. That uh, I'm glad to hear that because I learned a lot from your asparagus talk last week. Hopefully everybody else did too.
I hope so. And hopefully everybody keeps learning stuff all
Mm-hmm.
season long because we're just going to keep on going.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. What uh, a little sneak peek on next week there. Are we going to talk about corn a little bit, or is that your
Yeah,
plan?
next week we're
Talk
going
a
to
little.
talk about corn and the decisions that are happening at this time of the year on a corn farm that maybe not be a corn farm for the season. So we'll get into all of that next week.
and and we'll see what Erin Egan's schedule's like. Maybe we'll get her on the show next week or the week after there. But she said she'd love to come on, so we'll try to get her on pretty soon.
Yep, sounds like a plan to me.
So alrighty, guys. Well, hopefully you're enjoying your week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
How do you stop recording? Oh, there we go.